I've seen and experienced a lot over the last 7 decades in my career. I've met many interesting people, performed over 25,000 shows, and yes, even tuned in on the thoughts in the minds of over 1 million. But then, who's counting? Now, I'm telling you what really happened. Welcome to Kreskin's Amazing Experiences. It's the first of a series in which I'm going to be sharing with you personal experiences and ideas that happened throughout my career. I have one which has fascinated people for years because of the 88 Carson shows that I did. They said, Kreskin, you must have had incidents take place that you couldn't tell the public about. And when this was all done and Carson finally left, I thought, I might as well sell or share or at least reveal to my audiences the incident that the heads of the NBC network banned me from ever doing with Johnny Carson. Oh yes, and wait till you hear this. Carson had a rule, a condition, that when he did his program, if I was coming on next week or what have you, what did I have in mind in doing? They wanted to make sure they had the right setting, maybe the right place to be. Should Carson be at his desk, or does he want me to do with the audience around him? And they did this with singers, they did this with performers, dancers, what have you. And in my case, because these were very special events. And I described this to Carson's crew. And they said, okay, we'll explain this to Johnny, and we'll see you next Monday. This was on a Monday. And I got a call. I got a call later in the day or the next day, not from Johnny Carson or his secretary, whom I got to know fairly well, or one of his producers, but from one of the heads of the NBC network. I thought, oh my gosh, this is the first time. And as I picked up the phone, of course, I was stunned, not because of it being Carson or his secretary or one of his producers, but a voice I did not know. And don't you know, it was one of the heads of the NBC network. And they introduced themselves, and I said, good evening or good afternoon. They said, Kreskin, you're going to be on with Johnny next Monday. Are you not? I said, yes, this is already agreed to. It's already in some of the press. They said, this piece you're going to do with Johnny, you are not to do it. Under no circumstances will you do this with Johnny Carson, ever, whether it's on our show or some other appearance. I said, well, I understand. Please, I don't want to in any way antagonize anyone. They said, all right, that's it, and they hung up. And I was in a slight state of shock. It's the first time I've ever been told, previewing a show, not to do something, because I always felt that I had a sense of the program and what it was all about and what have you. And I started to plan in my mind, well, what could I do with Johnny? He was so looking forward to this and what have you. Well, a couple days later, I get a call from Johnny's secretary, and she did not usually call the people that were guests on the program, but she got to know me well. She said, Kreskin, Johnny would like to know where he can call you tomorrow, where you will be. I said, well, I won't be here in New Jersey. I'm going to be in the Midwest at a university, depending on what time of the day. They said, Kreskin, he'd probably like to call you later on the day when he's finished taping his show and what have you. I said, that's fine, because my performance is sometime early during the day and what have you. I thought to myself, what in the world is Carson calling me about? And don't you know, for the first time in all the years I worked with Johnny Carson, I get a personal telephone call with him, not to discuss what's going to happen on the show, but a call that I'm really unaware of. Johnny calls me. He said, I understand that you heard from one of the officials here at NBC regarding next Monday's appearance. I said, yes, Johnny, I don't want to upset you or offend anybody, and believe me, I had no intention of causing you any danger. He said, well, you can quote me because I'd like the son of a bitches to know that they can go to hell because, Kreskin, you're going to do this. Understand, you're going to do this with me. I said, gee, Johnny, I don't want to cause any misfeeling. He says, you're not causing any misfeeling because I would like them to go to hell. And that was the end of the conversation. Now, the days go by, and I'm now in New York City because they always send a car to pick me up. And when I arrive downstairs, outdoors, there's someone that nods towards me, and we were going to have a walkthrough of the whole experience. I wasn't going to do it with Johnny the way I planned it, but positioning and what have you. Because you see, what I intended to do is to have Johnny stand by me. I would talk to him. His eyes would grow heavy and they would close. His body would start becoming very, very rigid. And he'd suddenly be standing, not suddenly, but gradually to the point that he had sudden rigidity. His entire body would be rigid. And as this happened, he would start to fall backwards. And McMahon and the musical crew would catch him, and we would lift him, because 2 chairs would be on the stage, and they would be about 5.5 feet apart, facing each other, and Johnny would be resting, so his shoulders would be on one chair, head and shoulders, his feet would be on the other, and we would let go of him, and there he would be suspended, except that I had one further touch in mind. This is called catalepsy. In hypnotic parlance, it's a legendary phenomena, and one that years ago people saw and would look upon with awe. I would call one of the guests over to sit on the middle of Carson and raise their legs as they sat there. And Carson was enthusiastic about the idea. Obviously, he still was, after he was told by NBC, you're not to do this, they were quite afraid of his well-being. We didn't have a chance for a walkthrough of positioning the chairs and so forth, and my feeling just how if he started falling, we would catch him and so forth. And I came there, did not go to his dressing room. And by the way, it just been made public about 3 months ago that Johnny Carson did not allow any of his guests in his dressing room or office before the show, even those he knew from the past, because he felt that if they said something amusing or crazy, that would be perfect on the show, but it's never quite the same. And now many people who have talk shows now or in broadcasting, when I tell this to, say, Kreskin, you taught me something. I will not meet with a guest before a show. The spontaneity, and even if something goes wrong, Carson had a ball when something went wrong. Today on the CBS show that was opposite Carson, they would repeat it all over again when something went wrong. So now I'm coming on the set. Johnny's introduced me and he said, we're going to do something rather unorthodox. I'm not going to interview Kreskin. He's not going to do any of his thought reading work. He's doing something very special, and you want to explain what it is? And I said, yes, Johnny, it has to do with the fact that around the world, even in countries where my language is not spoken, I show how it's possible to influence human behavior to such a degree that I can cause catalepsy, And catalepsy in psychological and psychiatric terms means body rigidity to a point that's almost hard to believe. Johnny, as I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to him, he's standing there, and Ed McMahon is standing to his right because they were told what's going to happen, and Ed McMahon said, "Don't worry about his falling, Kreskin. I will be there to catch him. You can bet your bottom dollar on that." And the musicians, a few of them were by the chairs. And Johnny's eyes started to close, and his body became rigid, and he got glassy-eyed, and then he started to fall backwards. And at that moment I nodded, and Ed caught him, and the crew picked his legs up, and there was one long, rigid piece, like a piece of metal, and his head and shoulders were placed on the one chair, his feet on the other. And there, and the audience started applauding, because there, Carson, you would never think he'd allow himself to be put in such a situation. And I looked at the guests on the show, and I said to one guest, "Would you come over here?" And who I pointed to, she was sitting closest to us, was Bette Midler, and she did not get up. I said, "Bette, please come over," and she did not get up. And Ed McMahon looked at her and said, "Just go over to Kreskin," and she would not get up. When we came out at the top of the show, there were two men sitting in the front row in the audience, but they seemed to be rather distinguished the way they were. And Carson nudged me and whispered, he said, "Those are two officials from this damn network." He didn't say that on the air. So they kept saying, "Bette, please come over." And finally, the producer said, "This is very important to the program, Bette. You're to go over now." And she got over. And I said, "Bette, I want you to stand in front of Johnny, and please trust me, sit on him." She sat in the middle of him, and lift your legs up. She told me, because she had insisted on having lunch with me a few days later at a restaurant in New York City, she says, "Kreskin, I thought I would never be asked on the program again. For me to go over to a man that's stretched between two chairs, looking precariously so, and then for me to sit on him." And it turned out that that picture of her sitting on Carson was in Sunday newspapers all over the United States. It became a classic. So you see, even what looks precarious may not end that way if I handle it properly.